Hello and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Kelly Nicoll, President of IOSH, and I am delighted to welcome you to the first in our session of our Working at Height webinar series. This series is part of our new campaign called Don't Fall Silent. It's a call to action to raise awareness, share knowledge, and drive change in how we approach safety at height. Because we all know that the risk of falling from height is real. An estimated 684,000 fatal falls occur across the world every year. And it saddens me to say that 60% of those deaths occur in the Western Pacific region and Southeast Asia. The latest figures from the Health and Safety Executive here in the UK show that falls from height remains the leading cause of workplace fatalities in Great Britain, accounting for 35 deaths in 24-25. That's over a quarter of work-related fatalities. That's pretty much one every 2 weeks, a knock on the door that says that a family member is not coming home. The construction sector continues to be the most affected, with 35 worker deaths, many of which were due to falls. And these are not just numbers. Behind every single one of those statistics is a person, a family, a community, a workplace, forever changed. So I would like to introduce Frank, please. He's a HSEQ specialist for Monjasa, based in Dubai, and he's going to start us off with high-rise construction projects and height safety. Thanks, Frank.
Every worker has someone special waiting for them to return home safely. So it could be their mom, their dad, their brothers or their sisters, uncles or aunties. So as health and safety professionals, we should always stay proactive and know that when we look at a worker, we don't only see them, but we should always think about their families and their loved ones. Here we have two photos. We have photo A and photo B. When we stay proactive, we are going to enhance workers and support them to go back home to their happy families. However, if we are reactive, then it's going to lead to pain, not only to the worker who is involved, but to their loved ones. So we should always decide which photo we want to keep before, during, and after our construction projects. My name is Agwe Frank Tebo. I'm a chartered member of IOSH, an IOSH Council member. I'm a global advocate for health, safety, environment, and quality, and I'll be focusing today on high-rise construction projects and height safety. Our main country of focus will be the United Arab Emirates, and precisely Dubai. Now, if you see this slide, you have an overview of the high-rise buildings in the UAE, and you can see that Dubai has 251 buildings taller than 150 meters, 130 buildings taller than 200 meters, and 33 super tall skyscrapers that's greater than or equal to 300 meters. And it keeps going on and on. Followed by Dubai, we have Abu Dhabi, then the Emirates of Sharjah, and every other Emirates. This is just an overview, and on a daily basis, the construction projects are going on in the UAE. These are just some beautiful photos of high-rise buildings in the UAE. As you can see, Burj Khalifa is 828 meters tall, and that's the tallest building in the world. The first two pictures are from Dubai, and the pictures below are from the Emirates of Sharjah. Now, for us to actually achieve the end products, that's, for example, the photos we saw initially, we need some regulations and agencies to ensure that our construction projects are going on smoothly. In the UAE, we have the Federal Labor Law, that's 1980, which was founded in 2021. In Dubai, we follow the Municipality Code, the FLS Code, and in Abu Dhabi, we have the IOSH SF. So this is just an overview of some of the codes that we use in the UAE. However, there are a lot of codes and regulations that we have. But the issues we face is that it's a fragmented authority. So we are calling for a unified regulation. And what do we mean by that? When you work in Dubai as a health and safety officer or professional, you might face some difficulties with the regulations that are being implemented in the Emirates of Abu Dhabi. So moving from one emirate to another, it differs. But if we have a united regulation, it's going to streamline the process and make the work much easier. Now, I'll be introducing to you high-rise construction buildings. And what are just high-rise construction buildings? They are buildings that exceed 23 meters. But we ask ourselves, is it really important for us to have these high-rise buildings, knowing the risks it involves in constructing them and actually living in them? But the answer is yes. Yes, it's very important because it maximizes urban space and it shapes the city skylines. So when we look at the high-rise buildings, what's the first thing that comes into our mind? Planning and design. It's very important for us to have a good plan for our high-rise buildings. And if we don't have a good plan, what could happen? It could lead to catastrophe. Workers can die, people living in the buildings will die, and it's going to affect the city and the reputation of the country. So when we talk about designs, what do we focus on? We focus on the structural strength. What is the strength of this building? Can it withstand environmental stress and the challenges we have with respect to maybe some environmental conditions like typhoons, heavy rains, storms? So we have to do the site analysis and do some feasibility studies. Is this area good enough to actually withstand the weight of this building? If it's not good, then we have to move to another area. And also, when we talk about designs, we look at the design choices, the aesthetics, and also see how we can integrate the infrastructure with a balanced building. Now, another key aspect we are looking at, especially in this generation, is sustainability. How do we integrate sustainability? So we talk about energy efficient systems that could be implemented in such high-rise buildings, the use of green materials and waste reductions to minimize environmental impacts. Now, in the UAE, most of the areas that we have the high-rise buildings are made up of soft soil. So as you can see, we have the soft soil, we have the bay mud, and we have the bedrock. So for most of these buildings to actually have the structural integrity, we need to do piling. And sometimes we excavate the soil to 18 meters below, right down to the bedrock to ensure that the foundation is very stable. And without this excavation and solid piles, then the building is actually exposed to environmental conditions that can cause collapse or destructions of such buildings. So in the UAE, it's very important, and regulations or regulatory bodies, especially the UAE government, focuses on the foundation because this is the key to any high-rise construction project. For us to also achieve these high-rise buildings, we have to focus on height safety. And what do we talk about height safety? There are various activities that will be carried out, such as lifting, work at height, which happens to be the highest risky activity that we have for high-rise buildings. So what do we have to do as health and safety professionals? We have to be proactive and put in place control measures to prevent any of these high-risk activities from being a catastrophe. Also, we look at the site regulations. The government puts in place these regulations, but HSC, as we as health and safety professionals in coordinations with the operation team, has to ensure that these regulations are being complied with. And how do we ensure that compliance is being done? By giving the right trainings to the workers, by ensuring that shortcuts are not being taken or are being implemented throughout the construction projects from the beginning till the end of the project, and by ensuring that there is active supervision, there is consultation, and there is also inspections that are being carried out on daily basis. When we also look at our PPEs, what sort of PPEs do we give the workers? Do we go for the cheapest PPEs in the market just because we want to save costs? Or do we actually issue standard PPEs to the workers? Do we train them and make them understand the importance of them using their PPEs while carrying out these high-rise activities? Do we check their health conditions to ensure that the workers are fit to work? And if they are not fit to work, what do we do? Do we just terminate them and send them home? And if we are terminating them and sending them home, what examples are we also showing to other workers? So this is something that we keep in mind. And when it comes to the fall prevention systems, such as our safety harness, the safety nets, do we inspect them on daily basis, or do we just buy them and say, oh, it was bought in January, so we can use it till the end of the year? No. We know that construction activities changes as the day goes by or as time goes by. So whenever we start an activity, we need to inspect. Before starting, we need to inspect this equipment. We need to check them and ensure that they are in good conditions before any worker can use them. Because if a worker uses a faulty equipment, there is no need for that worker to use it at all. And we are just simply exposing the worker to a very severe condition, which could lead to a fatality. Nowadays, we have smart PPE technologies where workers wear sensors, and these sensors help to monitor the workers' movement and environmental conditions to enhance safety. And also a very key important point we're looking at is the culture. What culture do we have in our working in construction sites, especially for high-rise buildings? Do we have a positive culture where we focus on the morals? How do we encourage workers to do the work? How do we receive feedbacks from the workers? And how do we implement proactive action plans to prevent any form of incidents? Those are things that we have to keep in mind. Also, the trainings. Do we go for very cheap trainings, or do we go for standard trainings to ensure that our workers are well equipped to do the job safely? So we always have to strike a balance, because at a certain point we might feel that, yeah, it's a little bit costly, but when you look at the risks or the impacts of not adhering to health and safety control measures in place, then definitely we'll be more exposed to incidents. So we have touched base on trainings. We have to talk about the standard safety protocols. What protocols do we have? With respect to traffic management and logistics, with respect to the site planning, with respect to people management, equipment management, to ensure that the project is being done. We also look at leadership, how our leaders involved in the high-rise construction projects. Do they visit the sites? Do they motivate the workers? Do they talk to them? Do they try to encourage them to do the work? Do they participate in drills, campaigns to show the workers that they don't only care about the projects, but they care about each and everyone doing this job? So we always have to keep that in mind. And what topics do we cover on the toolbox talks on daily basis? Do we touch base on some emotional topics that we can actually make the worker to understand how important health and safety is? Do we actually listen to them and know their challenges? Do we earn their trust and ensure that whatever we are implementing is what they want? We should always keep that in mind. Also, there are various case studies like the construction of the Burj Khalifa, which is the tallest building in the world. So currently, if we review these case studies, we will definitely see that there are a lot of best practices that we can take and implement in the current construction projects and future construction projects. And this will not go a long way to reduce the time for the construction, but it's also going to enhance safety and ensure that workers will go to the construction site on daily basis safe, they will do their job safely, and they will go back home safely. So what are some of the challenges we face in high-rise buildings? You can have environmental conditions such as winds, rain, human error, and equipment failure, which pose massive risk. You have technology and training solutions. With respect to technology, it's good. But if proper maintenance is not being done, if proper servicing is not being done, it can definitely affect us negatively. We have regulatory compliance and collaborations. How strict are we with respect to compliance? And how do we work on our various construction sites? Do we use a collaborative approach, or are we always fighting? Or safety is always wrong with respect to maybe any incident that happens? Do we actually use the blame culture, or do we work together to see that, oh, there is a gap? What can we do to prevent a reoccurrence? Innovations and adaptability. How open are we to new technologies, and how do we adapt them to our existing procedures, management systems, and policies? So I'll conclude by saying that health and safety, most especially in construction sites, is not just an easy bread to have. You need to be proactive. You need to focus. You need to ensure that you earn the trust of the workers. You need to comply with regulations, and you need to ensure that every worker that comes into the workplace is fit for the job. And if they are not fit for the job, please ensure that their health are in a good state before they can do any work. Remember, shortcuts are the perfect routes to hospitals. But if we do our job right, we collaborate, we identify opportunities for improvements, we work together, we will definitely achieve our projects together. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Frank. And yeah, we've had quite a few comments and some really positive feedback coming through. But no, really appreciate your time. Thank you. And yeah, it's a bit weird because I'm sitting there going, oh, I've been there. Well, I've seen that building in person now, and I appreciate how very tall and scary it can be. So next, I would like to welcome Steve Booker, who is chair of PASMA, the International Not-for-Profit Association for the Mobile Access Tower Industry. Steve will be speaking to us about emergency planning and crisis management when working at height. Over to you, Steve.
Thank you very much. Right, so yeah, hello everyone, and thank you for joining me today. As just been said, my name is Steve Booker. I'm the current chair of PASMA. I'm also the vice chair of the Ladder Association and group managing director of Kentech Training. So delighted to be here today speaking to you about the subject that is absolutely critical when we talk about work at height, which is emergency planning and crisis management. Working at height remains one of the highest risk activities across all industries. And when things go wrong, they tend to go wrong very quickly. So my aim in the next 10 minutes is to try and highlight why emergency planning matters and how it differs from wider crisis management. And most importantly, how we can prepare effectively so that we protect lives, minimize harm, and maintain control where it really counts. So let's start with a simple question. Why does emergency planning matter so much? Well, as we saw right at the start, the statistics speak for themselves. Falls from height remain the leading cause of workplace fatalities. Every single incident has a ripple effect, impacts the individual, their families, their colleagues, and the business. Emergencies, by their very nature, are unpredictable. We can't stop every accident from happening, but we can absolutely control how prepared we are to respond to it. So a bit of a cliche, but preparation does save lives. And remember, this isn't just a legal duty under health and safety law regulations. It's also a moral responsibilities. As leaders, managers, and safety professionals, people trust us with their well-being. Having clear, effective emergency plans is how we honour that trust. So, what does a good emergency plan actually look like? So first of all, it all starts with the basics, which is a thorough risk assessment, identifying the types of emergencies that could realistically occur when working at height. Second, we need to look at clear procedures. Everyone on site should know what steps to take, who is responsible for each action. Third, it comes down to competent people. Are the right individuals trained, confident, and ready to respond? Fourth, the equipment. Having the right rescue kits or access tools and equipment available, maintained and ready to deploy when required. And finally, communication protocols. If nobody knows who to call, how to escalate, and how to coordinate, even the best plans will fail. So I'd like to draw your attention basically to the difference between emergency response and crisis management. So when we're looking at emergency response, it's the immediate action we take in the heat of the moment to protect life and safety. For example, carrying out a rescue from a tower or administrating first aid. Then when we look at crisis management, this is a broader scope. It's about the organisation's coordinated approach to deal with the aftermath, managing operations, supporting affected employees, liaising with stakeholders, and even handling media attention. Both critical, but the priority on the moment is always to save lives first, then manage the wider crisis afterwards. So when we're talking about rescues from height, nowhere is emergency planning more important than when it comes to rescue at height. One of the biggest mistakes organisations make is assuming that calling the fire brigade or emergency service is enough. But relying solely on emergency services is not a plan. The reality is that the emergency must be, or the rescue must be immediate. Every minute matters. So why workers must be trained either in self-rescue or assisted rescue procedures. When we look at this, the rescue equipment we use, first of all, it's just as important as the right equipment must be suitable for the task, immediately available, and regularly inspected and maintained. Because in an emergency, the worst possible situation is discovering that your rescue kit is locked in a stored cupboard or hasn't been checked for months and is either out of date or shouldn't really be used. So in an emergency, communication can make or break the response. We need pre-planned communication channels, whether that's radios, mobile phones, or agreed visual signals. Everyone must know who's in charge. There must be a clear chain of command when it comes to emergency response. And how do we communicate in emergencies? Are we using radios, phones, signals? Does everyone know the right channels? And it's also vital to ensure external emergency services are briefed about your site in advance. For example, if you're operating in a confined or complex environment, make sure the local responders know the layout and the access points. That preparation could save valuable minutes. Of course, no plan will work without training or practice. So regular drills give people the confidence and muscle memory to act effectively under stress. This isn't about ticking a box, it's about making sure that when the alarm goes off, panic doesn't take over. And creating this muscle memory, this immediate reaction to a drilled response to an emergency is key in achieving this. So scenario-based training is especially valuable. Practicing responding to falls, entrapment, or medical emergencies at height. And after each drill, review the performance. What worked, what didn't, what can we improve next time? That cycle of practice and improvement is how good plans become great plans. And this really does make a difference. I've seen so many organizations that have really committed to this scenario-based training, actual emergency training at the rock face, as it were, where people get to know exactly where the lanes to work the places to go, who to contact. Is the best way of creating an emergency plan. So if we look into, lessons from incidents, sadly, many of the lessons in this area come from real incidents. Investigations often reveal the same reoccurring issues, and these can be delay in rescue. Severe injury, fatality can be a result of people not knowing exactly where, who to call, how to go about a rescue. Lack of equipment. Again, the equipment you use must be tested, inspected, not in a locked cupboard somewhere. People have got to know where to get hold of it. And then the other one is poor communication. This leads to confusion and chaos. No one likes to see anyone in harm's way, but it can create bad situation on site without fail when you see someone in harm's way, when you think if we'd got there sooner, if we'd acted quicker, if we had the right people, the right equipment, we could have stopped a serious injury becoming a fatal one. So every incident is tragic, but every incident is also an opportunity to learn. The key is not wait until something happens to put a robust system in place. Learn from others, not from our own mistakes. Being part of schemes like IOSH are running now, where we communicate to each other our own learnings, our own experiences, and the scenarios that we've actually been part of, can help further that understanding. Some of the key takeaways that we often look to get from these is to make sure that we do share these things. So plan for the worst and hope for the best. Again, something that you hear about a lot, but really does come down to those points where emergency planning is not just a legal requirement. It is a moral duty that we hold for not only the people that we work alongside, but some of the people that are affected by the work we do, and subsequently the emergency services themselves. Having a good, robust system in place means that in the unlikely event an accident happens, we can react quickly. So rescues, again, must be immediate, practiced, and practical. So I know in my own organisation, we robustly practice rescues to ensure that we know what to do and how to do it, and the equipment is in place and is ready to act upon. So practice is the best way to do this. And of course, making sure people are competent and understand. Crisis management extends beyond the incident. So crisis management itself, it's about how we look after people, how we look after operations, and the reputation in the aftermath. Equally as important as any other situation we can come across when it comes to emergency response, if you like, because the most important thing is to get the people safe. Second to that is making sure that we can keep that site in an operational and safe manner and learn from those mistakes. Closing message really is about leaving you with these thoughts, as it were. So emergencies at height are not a matter of if, but when. In my positions with PASMA and the Ladder Association and my own company, I've had the privilege to meet some people that have been affected by life-changing injuries. I won't name names, but there is a common theme when I have the opportunity to talk to them. And every one of them, without fail, will say to me, I never thought it was going to happen to me. 5 seconds before the incident occurred, it was not going to happen. It happens to other people. And unfortunately, they fell foul of an accident that basically ended up with them having a life-changing injury that can result in them having mobility issues, or in some case, never being able to work again. So it's a knock-on effect then, not only to themselves and their own physical and mental health, but the families that have to support them, their grandchildren, their work colleagues. One thing I've learned from being involved with people that have had life-changing injuries is quite how deep that effect is. And it's a real saddening fact when you see, the children of these people, the mums, the dads, relatives, friends that will break down in tears when you actually talk to them at any length about how it's affected them. And they try to stay strong because they don't want the person that's had the life-changing injury to have the guilt attached with it. But most of them do carry an awful lot of guilt about how they've affected their loved ones and their colleagues. So it really is, the unpredictable can and does happen. But by preparing properly, we can make sure that when it does, our response is controlled, is confident, and above all else, effective. So planning, say, crisis management protects people, but one thing I would finish with is be prepared, be protected, and be proactive in your emergency and rescue planning. So thank you. That's me for the day.
For now.
For now,
yes. I've got a feeling we'll have some questions for you later. I think that final message, Steve, really resonated with me. I've had 3 falls, not me personally, but throughout my career, I've had to deal with 3 falls from height from at various different degrees. One being a fatality of a really young man, and one being a collapsed ladder in the same company, just over five years separating the fatality and the temporarily life-changing injuries that Dan had. And one of the things that we don't always talk about, which is why working at height, and this is one of my themes, is actually the level of responsibility and guilt that perhaps we feel as health and safety professionals as well.
Sure.
When a ladder collapsed underneath Dan, and I remember walking into the hospital the day after to go and see him and his family and make sure that we were doing everything to look after him. And I could hear him screaming down the other end of the ward. And even now, a number of years later, catch me on a bad day, and I can still hear that. That's still, it's why it's one of the things that has really, it was one of the big drivers for me, was we think we're doing everything that we possibly can. And yet, 2 years ago, the stats were practically 1 family every week we're getting that knock on the door. This year, last year, the stats have improved somewhat in the UK, but we've still got an awful long way to go. And it is very much that thing of, then people don't think it's going to happen to them. Gravity is always there, and gravity is not very pleasant if you disrespect it too much.
Yeah, and hindsight's a wonderful thing.
Oh, of course it is.
When you can focus on what you could have done to have prevented it, you realize it's not a great deal. It's just a bit of focus.
Yeah.
But life gets in the way, work gets in the way.
Of course it does.
And, we miss these little things. And then when someone under our management has an injury, the guilt, what could I have done? And then you realize it was doable. It was very doable. But we just had 10 other things in front of it.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that. And I've had so many questions come in for you and Frank already, but before I get to those, and before I get to the list I already have, because I am really intrigued, I would like to introduce my presidential colleague, one of my vice presidents, Dr. Shaun Lundy, who is Chief Strategy Officer at Tetra Consulting, who will be talking about regulations and equipment for improving safety at height. Thanks, Shaun.
Thanks, Kelly. Thanks very much. And hello, everyone. Good morning or good evening, wherever you are in the world. So just really to finish things off, I wanted to sort of go through, some of the sort of practical things that we see, certainly within the business that I work for. And if I can get my slides to move on, there we go. So just a bit about us as a firm. So Tetra, we're a health and safety business, actually. We've got about 200 people working in our business doing all sorts of things around health and safety and project work. But one thing we're quite well known for is work at height, and in particular our ladder system, which we've been supplying for over 20 years into the telecommunications sector, a sort of tied ladder system. We provide that to people like BSkyB and BT Openreach, and have done for decades. It's had a significant impact on reducing falls from height from that type of temporary work. But we also work into the sort of tall building sector as well, certainly in London and other cities around the UK, doing things like compliance audits and reports, risk assessments, and sort of roof inductions. And we see, unfortunately, a lot of examples of both sort of equipment issues on roofs, which obviously can lead to sort of catastrophic events, but also the sort of human element as well, where people just simply aren't following the safe systems of work and training. So we do a lot of work around inductions and safe systems of work, as well as sort of decommissioning and recertification work as well. So all of these are becoming more and more critical, I think, as we move into the future, particularly as we see these systems kind of deteriorate over time. Once these buildings have been up for quite some time, of course, that equipment requires maintenance and obviously requires inspections as well. So the sort of typical work at height issues that you're probably familiar with, and I know colleagues on the webinar have already gone through some of this, but some of the things we also see around sort of problems to do with dismantled guardrails, because people just dismantle them, walk through them to do work, and then leave them in that state. So unfortunately, that's quite frequent. Unguarded access hatches and skylight issues as well, where there's not determined whether they should be sort of barriered off or whether there is a risk of falling through them, and even unsecured sort of access hooks as well, which are quite common. So we see a variety of issues. The other things we sort of bear in mind as well, and I've got a case study at the end of this presentation, it's around adverse weather conditions as well. So where we're getting a lot more sort of storms certainly arrive in the UK, but certainly around the world, that can lead to problems as well, of course, working in those areas, but also material leaving the roof and potentially causing a problem for people on the ground. And then, of course, the human factor, the fact that people and processes need to operate alongside equipment in order for there to be success and preventing those sort of issues from arising. So when we think about legislation, there is no single international law that governs work at height globally. So compliance typically is set by local legislation. In fact, in the UK, I suppose relatively recently, we had the work at height regulations that came in 2005. But before that, we didn't have any specific regulatory requirements around work at height, apart from what was included in some construction legislation. We see a mix around the world as well. So different areas have different types of legislation that sort of allude to work at height or deal with it directly. Most organizations rely on a mix of standards, so international standards, rope access as an ISO, and there's a number of British standards that are applied in the UK. BS 7883 is a particularly challenging one, which deals with fall protection equipment, which we've been sort of working with clients to help them understand the requirements there. A lot of the equipment that's provided as well, and some of the systems also come with their own standards. These could be European standards, ANSI, which is an American standard, or BSI, which is obviously British. There's a lot of commonality between these standards, but there are quite a few variations as well. And then we have the industry codes of practice as well. So organizations like Steve's organization, PASMA, Ladder Association, and others will provide their own industry codes of practice as well. There is an all-party parliamentary group in the UK on work at height, which seeks to improve standards, if you like, and also make them a bit more accessible to people as well. Because one of the big issues we find, certainly with our clients, is they really struggle to understand what the requirements are, and there's a lot of complexity there. So international standards can be useful because they can sort of provide harmonized sort of benchmarks around things like competence, equipment performance, and also safe systems of work. So there's lots of common areas of practice, I think, which we can share and learn from each other in terms of setting better standards going into the future. So the work at height regulations that we have in the UK sort of pivot around these three key areas. So the first one, of course, being avoiding the need to work at height where it's reasonably practicable to do so, and then sort of preventing falls using the existing place of work or types of equipment. And then certain types of equipment can be provided to, of course, minimize the distance and consequences of fall. So this provides a bit of a hierarchy, and you can see in the diagram there, typical hierarchy with hazard elimination at one end, and then sort of fall arrest and administrative controls at the other. So the legislation really encourages or demands, if you like, the duty holder to consider things in some sort of order and then apply the hierarchy. So, if you can use an alternative source of access from a ladder, for example, something a bit safer, then you should consider that unless there's extremely good reason not to. So where ladders have to be used, you should make sure that they are as safe as possible, hence, the use of things like the Tetra ladder system and better designed ladders as well, which are less likely to fall. So some of the sort of solutions that we see in operation. So the temporary solutions, whether it's mobile elevated work platforms, scaffold towers, and also rope access as well. IRATA stands for Industrial Rope Access Trading Association, and then ladders and step ladders as well. So not all of these will be relevant to taller buildings, but certainly things that need to be considered in the whole work at height agenda. When we move on to sort of roof spaces on tall buildings, then we find a whole variety of things that need to be in good working order and certainly need to be manufactured to the right standard. So that could be fixed anchor points or movable anchor points, if you like, which can be moved around roofs. We often see deterioration with these or damage to them, which obviously, if it's not repaired, can lead to a significant risk of injury. Latchways as well, where people can hook on and move around a roof space as well. They can be problematic again if not maintained, and certainly the operatives aren't trained in their use. And then guardrails, which obviously we'd expect to see on tall buildings, but sometimes we find that they have been dismantled or damaged and not repaired, leading to a very unsafe environment and condition. There are other sort of things which we're seeing more of, this davit system, which is often used in conjunction with rope access. Certainly in the UK, we've been doing a lot more work with the external facades of buildings, certainly under the Building Safety Act, where we've had to replace facade material post Grenfell, the Grenfell disaster, where sadly 72 people lost their lives, has led to lots of concerns, not only about structural safety and fire, but also the need to change our buildings, in other words, remove facade material. So that's required inspection, sometimes using systems like this. A lot of buildings come with building maintenance units as well. They can be fixed or mobile. They require very specific and specialized training. And of course, they present a significant risk if they're not well maintained and inspected. And then within the sort of roof space itself, you get a combination of access requirements. So that could be step over gantries, or even vertical fixed ladders, moving from certain bits of the building at roof level. Of course, they can deteriorate as well, and they need frequent inspection and maintenance. So what do you need to do? What are the kind of requirements? Well, typically everything starts with a risk assessment. So we would expect all work at height activities to have an assessment of risk. And in fact, our regulatory framework in the UK does require that. We would expect as well some sort of compliance evaluation over equipment. So, if your equipment fails, that's going to lead to significant injury, life-changing injury, and potentially death. So compliance evaluations, I think, are really critical. Unfortunately, we do have a variety of different expectations around that in terms of industry standards. So some sort of harmonization around the requirement for compliance evaluations would be useful. We certainly get involved in a lot of asset analysis, so retain or decommission equipment. You don't want old equipment sort of sitting on roofs, not being used. Could be recertification of things like lifeline or eye bolts or fixed ladders. All of these things need to be looked at, or even just removing obsolete equipment and then certifying the removal has been done to the right standard. People are important in the equation as well. So roof inductions for safe access, anyone going onto a roof is particularly at risk. So they will need to be competent to do that. So roof induction packs, I think, are quite useful. We certainly do a lot of those. And then that general training requirement, heightening people's awareness of the risks around work at height, but also reminding them how to use their equipment in the right way and encouraging that. So management and oversight, of course, around things like project management. So that could include things like contractor selection, being an intelligent customer, which I'll talk about in the next slide, but also thinking about the new installation of equipment that may be required and the ongoing impact of that. So just on that point around intelligent customer, something that's been driven quite hard by the new Building Safety Act is making clear that organizations have an obligation, if you like, to be knowledgeable of the products or services being supplied. And that includes people that you contract in to do work. So the intelligent customer is the customer that knows what good looks like, knows what their expectations are, knows what standards to apply, and of course will select contractors to make sure that they achieve those requirements and then supervise and monitor that work. So I think work at height is one of those significant critical risks which require a real intelligent customer piece, and certainly I think duty holders should consider that as well. Just to finish off then, just mindful of time, a case study I wanted to share as well was the Tanny Martin case, where sadly Tanny was killed by a large and heavy wooden panel that got blown off during a storm we had in the UK called Storm Doris back in 2017. The interesting thing about this, although this is not specifically a work at height issue, if you like, it is caused by something falling from height. But actually the case really highlighted a problem with planned preventive maintenance program, which excluded the roof. And that included things like all the bits and pieces that were on the roof, the latchways, any equipment that was there to protect people from falling from height. As well as sort of considering your building and the safety and security of the building, you've got to consider the building quite holistically, I think. Cushman and Wakefield will find 1.33 million for this, and also our professional body in the UK, RICS, fined them £200,000 for bringing the profession into disrepute for not managing that building satisfactorily, and that included work at height and their failures around planned preventive maintenance programs. Thank you, Kelly. Hopefully that's just given a good overview of that area. Hopefully tied things together a little bit.
And really do appreciate it. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? Is we need to understand that it's not just about what happens when we build these buildings and how we do that safely, but also how we maintain and then look after the people that are also using those buildings. So we have 9 minutes left. I have 17 questions and a whole heap that I also want to ask. So if I can ask for Steve and Frank to join us back on screen. One of the questions that I have, which I am also going to get involved in, because for those of you that aren't aware, part of my background is I've worked in an awful lot of businesses where working at height was a significant part of what we did. And not just working at height here in the UK, but working at height across, we worked across 190 different countries in various stadiums and stadia across the world. And so one of some of the questions we have are around training and how, so in particular, should we be doing health checks for people that we're expecting to work at height? And secondly, how do we check if people are scared of it? If people have a height phobia, how do we check that before we stick them on top of something really tall? Anybody want to jump in before I do?
Shaun?
Yeah, I just jumped just on that, Kelly. It's quite an interesting point about the fear of heights. I mean, we in another business I work for, we had a Legionella risk assessor. They'd been doing sort of some pretty routine, water checks, and then they upskilled to be a Legionella risk assessor. But they had a real fear of heights, and of course, in the residential sector, you have to go on roofs. To go to look at tanks, basically. Often they're not. There's no guardrails around those roofs. Not all tall buildings in the UK have roof guarding, guardrails like that, for various reasons. And it was a real issue for them, actually. They felt quite unsettled as soon as they got on the roof and realised how high up they were, of course, and that was a bit of a concern. So yeah, just to make that point, it does happen.
Yeah. So one of the things that I used, because it's great, isn't it? You can interview people as they start their job, and you go, this involves working at height. You're up on very tall buildings. You're up on, and some people don't recognize that they have a fear of it until they are up there. And somebody's just posted in the chat box that phobia is an unreasonable or uncommonly intense fear. I would say that I agree with that until you see somebody. Like when you see somebody with a genuine phobia, like logic doesn't come into it. My best friend has a phobia of balloons, particularly balloons popping, the noise that they make when they pop. And it seems silly to an awful lot of people. It is not when you see how absolutely terrified she is when there is a surprise balloon in a room with her. So one of the things that we did was we made use of new technology. We used VAR. So not VAR, virtual headsets. VAR is what we used to do. We use virtual headsets, which give you the feeling and the visual and that kind of body physical response when you're working at height without the insecurity of being at that height. And we actually did that as part of the interview process, and then would do it as part of our working at height training, because you can't escape that physical feeling.
It is difficult, Kelly. I mean, I've not only do I do towers with PASMA ladders, I'm also a senior iPath instructor and do mutes.
Yeah.
And I've had people freeze at height. The simple reason is when people come for training, as often as they're going for their first day at work, the last thing they want to admit to any employer is that they have a phobia.
Yeah.
Because it will affect their employment and their ability to earn money. So they go, yeah, fine, I'm okay, a little bit apprehensive of height. I've had people where their employer said, you need training on this large, cherry picker. And we've told them up they go. And they get to a point where, as you know, with mutes, they do tend to move a little.
They do, yeah.
And that movement will suddenly, the response goes. There's no conversation. The knuckles are going white. The grip on the platform handrails is so solid you couldn't prise it off with a crowbar. And I've had to bring people down with the ground controls. If you ask them before they went up, do they have a phobia of height that would prevent them being able to communicate, they go, no, it's not that bad. I'm just a little bit wary. No one really knows the effect of a phobia like working at height until you've actually experienced it. It comes on without any planning. It visits you when you least want it. I myself have been in places where I haven't frozen, but certainly the voice inside my head has been screaming at me, why are you here?
Why are you doing it? Yeah.
Yeah,
me too.
So it's a very real thing to people, and it's not something you can plan or even know you suffer from until it happens.
Yeah. So that kind of virtual reality kind of technology can help us kind of gauge that sometimes, but yeah, when the wind is whistling around you and the thing that you're standing on is swaying gently in a slight breeze and stuff, it really does change it. And I think that's the thing, is what we probably need to do at that point is make sure that, especially when people are newly starting with us, that when they are first working at height, that we have somebody who's really assured and really competent with them to be able to talk them through, not take the mick, and all of that kind of stuff, but actually really do look after and shadow that individual until we know that they're confident and comfortable. We have so many questions. It is ridiculous. Lots around training. Yeah. So how do we make sure that people are trained and competent to work at height? Is there a specific piece of training or a specific certificate that we want to see or recommend?
If I could add to that one, when you're working at height, you should be specifically trained on the processes you're using to work at height with. Do not waste your money on a generic work at height course. That will teach you regulatory requirements, duties, but it does not teach you how to work on any particular piece of equipment. My advice would be to make sure that you always choose a training provider that is recognized. Someone who has ideally some form of awarding body behind them, if not someone who's industry recognized as being a leader. It's not about money, it's about doing the right training. I know people say things need to be viable and costs are important. Yes, any business has got to look at costs. However, you are wasting your money if you do not get the right training.
And I think that is fundamentally the thing, isn't it? Is it's got to be the right training for your business and for what it is that you are doing.
Exactly.
You know, we spent we would spend an awful lot of time talking about the importance of harnesses and checking your harnesses and how you fit a harness properly. And then we had personal rescue devices because it kind of fit quite nicely with where we were. And that's Ben telling me I'm running out of time.
Yeah, I 100% agree with what Steve says. I mean, you know, there's no point in generic training unless you're just like doing it as at executive level or manager level. You just want
general awareness.
But yeah, you've got to be on the tools if you like. You've got to get using that equipment hands on.
Absolutely.
That's the only way.
That is literally all we have time for, and we will hopefully get all of those questions that you all have answered as soon as possible. Thank you very much for everybody's time. Really do appreciate all three of you, Shaun, Steve, Frank. Thank you so much for joining me, and hopefully I will see you all soon. Thank you very much.